everyone, and welcome back to another video. My name is Rachel, and this little angel is Kyra. And today we are, unfortunately, going to be talking about Steven Crowder. Now, if you don't know him, Steven Crowder is an American-Canadian political commentator, comedian, media host, and former actor. Or at least that's how his Wikipedia page defines him. You know he is untrustworthy and dodgy as hell because he used to work for Fox News before starting his own daily podcast called Louder with Crowder. Now, this podcast has been controversial for every reason imaginable. It has been demonetized and suspended on YouTube a couple of times for being racist, homophobic, spreading false information, harassing and threatening people, and basically every other terrible thing you can think of. Isn't that right? Yes. Crowder is also known for being a raging misogynist who promotes purity culture and traditional gender roles, and recently it's been revealed that for the last 10 years or so, he's been abusing his wife. He married her in 2012 and she filed for divorce in 2021, and a lot of stuff has come out about this. A lot of stuff has been revealed, and it puts a lot of his past content that he's put out on the internet into a whole new light, hasn't it, baby? It makes him seem very hypocritical. It kind of shows how abusive he is. There's a lot of pretty bad stuff out there, and as a survivor of domestic violence and intimate partner abuse myself, I feel it's important to talk about these sorts of topics because we do need to normalise victims and survivors sharing their stories and feeling like they're able to in a safe way. But it's also really important that we don't sensationalize this stuff. This isn't juicy gossip or drama or something like that. These are real people's lives. This is a dangerous man finally being exposed for the scum that he is. This isn't a, ooh, spill the tea, sis. This is a, thank God we finally know what kind of man he is, if it wasn't obvious before. I want to make sure that people are aware of the type of person Crowder is, and I also want people to know what kind of warning signs they might be able to look out for, you know, to notice and recognise abusive people in the future. Does that make sense? So we're going to start this video by looking back at a couple of things Steven Crowder has publicly preached about relationships in the last decade or so. All of these articles are from the Fox News website, and weirdly they're all dated around May 2015, but I'm sure quite a few of them are a lot older than that. I think they were just like republished in May 2015, maybe because of a new website or some sort of admin thing, I don't know. They don't really make it clear when they were originally published, which is, you know, awful for fact checking. Also, a lot of the sources he cites just don't link anywhere anymore. They're broken links. They don't go to actual, you know, credible sources. There's no real information there backing up a lot of his claims. And the other thing I'll warn you before we read these articles is his writing style is almost unbearable to read. He writes like a petulant, angsty teenager who's just been like, oh yeah, screw my parents and screw women. It's unbearable. Like, how did this man get paid for this writing? Just very quickly before we start though, and sorry for having to throw this in here, but I have a feeling YouTube is going to demonetize this video, and they've been demonetizing and suppressing quite a few of my videos recently because of controversial topics, like how I quoted a swear word 2 hours and 15 minutes into a video. Controversial. It's very annoying. It is very, very frustrating to kind of like put so much work into something and then have a big corporation like YouTube, you know, which makes billions, being like, no, actually we're not gonna pay you your fair share, sorry. So if you are able to help support my work or would like to at all, I would be incredibly grateful, but obviously it's not a necessity. I know not everyone can do it. Please make sure you're putting yourselves first and stuff like that, but if you do want to help support my work at all, I do have Patreon where you can get access to, I post things like my photography, script notes and stuff like that. I do polls. There's a Discord server you can join. I also, for like the slightly higher tiers, I have these exclusive like stickers and prints and stuff that get sent out every 3 months, which I think are really cool, and I really love that stuff. That's great. I also have a merch store where you can get like cool t-shirt and hoodie designs and stuff like that, all designed by me, and I also have an art and photography print store as well if you want to get a little piece of me in your home, which would be lovely. I also have a photography and poetry book available on Amazon, so I have many bits of work I've done that you can, you know, get if you want, and I'll link them all in the video description. Alternatively, you can just engage with this video, leave a like, leave a comment, share it around on social media. All of that stuff really, really helps, and I'm incredibly grateful. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Sorry I had to throw this in there, but thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting me and continuing to, and let's jump back into the video and talk about Steven Crowder, because why not? We love to torture ourselves here. So let's take a look at some of his articles, right? And we're going to start with this one titled, Waiting Till the Wedding Night, Getting Married, the right way, which is just as pompous and judgmental as it sounds from the title. They say never judge a book by its cover, never judge an article by the title, but in this case you can. This article was clearly written not very long after Crowder first got married, so at this point he'd been living with a woman for a handful of months and seems to think that because of that, he is an expert on long-term relationships and he's in the only good one in the world, and so everyone must do it his way because he knows best, right? See what I mean about the whole petulant teenager thing? Let me preface this column by saying this. My wife, I have to get used to saying that, and I not only waited sexually in every way, no, we didn't pull a Bill Clinton and technically avoid sex, but we didn't shack up as live-ins, and most importantly, we courted each other in a way that was consistent with our publicly professed values. We did it right. Feeling judged? I couldn't care less. You know why? Because my wife and I were judged all throughout our relationship. People laughed, scoffed, and poked fun at the young, celibate, naive Christian couple. We'd certainly never make it to the wedding without stopping, and if we did, our wedding night would be awkward and terrible, they said. Turns out, people couldn't have been more wrong. Like, okay, cool. Good for you. I'm glad your wedding night wasn't awkward and terrible, although I do have to wonder if his wife felt the same. We are only getting one side of the story here, let's remember that. But have you ever considered that since other people were wrong about their expectations of your experience in relationship, you might be wrong in your expectations and presumptions of other people's relationships? It goes both ways, Stephen. I don't get how he can sit there and literally be like, stop telling me that you're doing it right and I'm doing it wrong. No, I'm doing it right and you're doing it wrong. And he doesn't realise the hypocrisy of what he's saying and complaining about, and it's ridiculous. Seriously, whether you wait until you're married or not to have sex, either is fine, as long as it's your choice and you're doing what's best for you. It doesn't matter what other people think, really. You need to make these choices for yourself. You know, if you want to wait a certain amount of time to have sex, if you want to have sex straight away, if you want to wait until marriage, if you never want to get married, if you never want to have sex in your life, all of that is okay. There's no one right or wrong way for every person. It has to be a very individual decision, you know? He's happy to complain about people laughing, scoffing, and poking fun at him, but he goes on to do the exact same thing about other people, but worse. He gets really nasty in this next section, and it's just not appropriate. Looking back, I think the women saying those things felt like the floozies they ultimately were, and the men, with their fickle manhood tied to their pathetic sexual conquests, felt threatened. There's no need for that, is there? It's not accurate, and it's just mean for the sake of it. He's a nasty person. I also just want to mention that it's very possible that people weren't saying things like, aren't you worried your wedding night is going to be awkward and terrible, to shame you, or, sorry, they weren't saying this out of shame for their own sexual experiences, but because maybe they were actually concerned for him. Has he considered that? A big thing we see over and over in these types of relationships is people feeling immense guilt and shame when they finally do have sex. And this is a direct result of purity culture and the way people, especially women, have been made to feel like their sexuality is something to be ashamed of, something to be hidden away, something that's like, ooh, not quite proper. Purity culture is so damaging to so many people, and you do get this thing with a lot of Christian couples and a lot of couples who feel like they have to wait until their wedding night. They then feel there's this immense pressure to go from 0 to 100 straight away. They go from never touching, never kissing, never being physically intimate with someone to feeling like they have to have penetrative sex on the wedding night, and that is a huge, huge jump that can be very, very stressful, and it can lead people to being hurt, to not knowing what they're doing, to feeling awkward, to feeling ashamed, to feeling guilt. It can be really scary and awful for some people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people who are more sexually experienced expressing concern for you in that respect and offering a little advice. One thing I will say is that if you are one of these people who does want to wait until marriage to have sex, or you want to wait a certain amount of time, still don't feel like you have to rush it, okay? Just because you're married, it doesn't mean you have to go boom, straight in there straight away. That's not how it works. You still need to take the time to build up your trust between you, to understand physical intimacy, to know what you each like in terms of anything from like touching each other's faces or arms or hand holding. You know, you don't need to go straight into, whoops, there's a penis in there. You know, you can wait, you can build it up. If you are serious about this person, you're in this long-term relationship, you have the time to work on that trust and establishing boundaries and getting comfortable with each other. This is what I think people were kind of most likely trying to express concern for, or at least it's what I hope they were. But no, apparently offering advice and worrying about people's well-being makes those of us who speak like this, and I quote, "a rabble of promiscuous charlatans peddling their pathetic worldview as progressive." Seriously? Seriously? Crowder then goes on to boast, "Our wedding night was perfect. Our wedding night was nothing short of amazing. I write this on a plane heading into a tropical paradise with the most beautiful woman to have walked the planet Earth. I know everyone says their bride was the most beautiful in the world. They're wrong, I win." Okay, good for you, but you realise sex and relationships are not a competition, right? This whole "I'm better than you, my wife's prettier than yours" screams immaturity, and it just makes me very uncomfortable. Also, again, I have to say, you realise there's more than one person in this marriage, right? I really want to know, does your ex-wife feel the same way about your wedding night as you do? Maybe she did. Maybe she also thinks it's perfect and amazing. Maybe she doesn't. We have to be aware we are only hearing one side of this story here. He then says that his wedding was better than other people's weddings because reasons. He compares his standards and goals to other people's standards and goals and says that even though we both achieved our goals, mine were better because they're mine. Again, petulant teenager. Very annoying. He doesn't acknowledge that sometimes other people want different things. He finds it very hard to display any kind of empathy or understanding for other people. It's worrying and bizarre. Then I realised something. Our wedding was truly a once-in-a-lifetime event. It was a God's honest celebration of two completely separate lives now becoming one. Physically, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. Everything that made us who we were individually was becoming bonded together. I mean, that literally sounds like hell to me, but good for you, I guess. So then he moans that the day after their wedding, they're at a hotel, and there was another couple there also celebrating their wedding the day before. And this couple, he assumes, hadn't saved themselves for marriage. So the next day, they'd had a pretty, fun wedding party. They'd had a bit to drink. They'd been dancing. They'd been celebrating. They'd stayed up late. They celebrated their wedding in the way that they wanted to. And the next morning, they're a little bit hungover, but they're also like, yeah, it was fun, but I guess nothing much has really changed for us. It's just, a continuation of our wonderful lives together. And Crowder gets really, really judgmental about this, and he gets really mean. And he's like, the people next to us that morning, well, theirs was just one big party. And the morning after, just another hangover. Our weddings were the same event in name only. They know it, and we know it. Why so mean? Why so judgy? You don't have to be. Yeah, you're right, they were very different weddings. Likely celebrating very different things, Maybe they would have also hated your wedding and your way of celebrating and viewing marriage. Has he ever thought of that? Just as you're judgy about their wedding, they might have felt the same about yours. They might have been like, oh God, now they've got married and everything's changed, and what if they don't like it? And what if they realise that they don't work well together and they don't live together and they find out all these things about each other? Because that's what I'd be thinking. Stephen's way of doing things is not the superior way. There's no one way or another that is superior or better or the only right way. I don't know how many times I have to say this. There's just different ways that work for different people. He just can't understand that other people have their own minds too. He goes on to write, if you're young and wondering whether you should wait, whether you should just give in, become a living harlot/mimbo and do it the world's way. And just before he continues, I'm just going to say this is funny because I lived with a man for 4 years and I wasn't a live-in harlot, but here we are. It really says a lot about what he thinks about what relationships are like and what roles in a relationship should look like, doesn't it? When he thinks that living together means you're a live-in harlot. Does he not understand that you can live with a partner and it be about sharing a life together, building a life together, enjoying each other's company, having fun together, being committed to each other? Because living together is a commitment, whether Stephen wants to acknowledge it or not. He just doesn't seem to understand that there's more to relationships than just sex. And then he goes on, blah, blah, blah. If you're wondering whether all the mocking, ridicule, the incredible difficulty of saving yourself for your spouse is worth it, let me tell you without a doubt that it is. Your wedding can be the most memorable day and night of your life, or just another party. Oops, did I make a judgment? You're darn right I did. So he's just such a narrow-minded idiot. He really is. I also don't see how a beautiful celebration of love and commitment is just another party. You're choosing to have this to celebrate your relationship, to commit to each other in front of the people you know and love. That's special if you want it to be, Just because you're not taking your life and throwing it on its head overnight, because you're making all these life changes at once, that doesn't mean you haven't still committed to someone and it's not a wonderful celebration of your love and commitment, His next article is titled, Why Not Having Sex Might Be Good For You, and it's all about the benefits of abstinence before you're married, which again, might be a great choice for some people, might be completely the wrong choice for others. I know for me, would not be the right choice. I'm someone who probably doesn't ever want to get married, and if I do, it won't be the whole traditional legal thing. So yeah, abstinence until marriage would not work for me. And that's okay. Different things for different people. That's just how life works, and it's all good. He starts by getting annoyed that people are more happy to talk about sex these days, but abstinence is still shunned in his mind. I'd argue that it's not abstinence that people have a problem with, because really, why does it matter where people stick their penises, or what they put in their vaginas, or whose genitals they touch, you know? It doesn't actually matter. It doesn't affect me what other people do with theirs, as long as they're not hurting anyone. So I'd argue that it's not abstinence people have problems with, but judgmental idiots like Crowder, who take abstinence and try and shove it down people's throats as though it makes him better than anyone else. He writes, whereas once upon a time the conversation was relegated to whispers behind closed doors, nowadays it's discussed openly and without shame. That's sex, he means, by the way. Funnily enough, today there is one area of sex that when discussed still makes people's posteriors pucker with discomfort. Abstinence. The idea of abstinence has become somewhat of a punchline in this country, from the myth of unrealistic abstinence-only education to the media's constant portrayal and mockery of young, nerdy, out-of-touch Christians riddled with chastity pendants. The message on abstinence being pumped through pop culture is clear. If you're abstinent, it's either because A, you're ugly, or B, you're a loser. In my case, it was often both. Well, I'm not going to deny Crowder is a loser and he's incredibly ugly on the inside, but that has everything to do with him as a person and nothing to do with his decision whether to have sex or not before he got married. But can we also take a moment to talk about how he thinks abstinence-only sex education being unrealistic is a myth? Because what? I get he's pro-abstinence and he wants other people to be, but wouldn't you rather have people come to your side and choose to be abstinent after reviewing all the options available to them and deciding that yours is the best, instead of what he wants to do, which is just people having to default to abstinence only because they don't know any different. They don't know there are any other options out there. It's not really a choice for them, it's just the default option. I'd rather people make their own choices and decide what's best for them, but he's like, no, none of this other stuff. We can't have them hearing about this. Abstinence only. But Crowder's ego aside, it's been proven time and time again that abstinence-only sex education does not work. It's not effective and it puts people in danger. Schools and areas which implement this policy have consistently higher rates of teen pregnancies and STIs because people don't know any better. I also think, don't quote me on this because I can't remember the source, but I'm pretty sure there is a link between abstinence-only sex education and dubious consent issues like more sexual assaults and stuff like that, because when people aren't taught about consent as part of sex education, it leads to problems. But I can't remember the source on that, so please don't quote me on it. The thing is, it might not be ideal for many young people to have sex, but realistically it's going to happen, and we need to make sure that when they are, confronted with options where they can choose to have sex or not, we need to make sure that in those situations they are prepared to deal with all the consequences and risks if it happens. We need to make sure they are fully educated so they can make the right decision for themselves. I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, teenagers, you should all be going out and having sex. Do it all the time. No, that's stupid. I would never say that. But what I am saying is that teenagers do have an interest in sex, whether it's something they want to do or it's just something they're curious about. And what we as adults need to do is make sure they have all the facts available to them. They understand what contraceptive options are. They understand what STIs are and how to prevent them. They understand what consent means, both for giving it and receiving it. They understand how to communicate with a partner. They understand the mechanics of sex. They understand about, this is going to sound silly, but like tools to aid them, like lubrication, for example, so they don't get hurt. If we can give them this information and help them think about these things critically for themselves, and understand not only the physical but the emotional consequences of sex, then that means that when these teenagers go out into the world, which they will, whether while they're still young or while they're adults, they're going to have all the tools necessary for them to say, well, do I want to have sex in this case? What does that mean for me? What will the consequences be for me? How am I protecting myself? And they can make an informed decision. I don't see how that is a bad thing. That is how you protect young people. You give them the tools to make the right decisions for themselves. They need to understand the information and they need to understand what these things mean in order to make the right choices. And for some people that will be abstinence. For some people that'll be waiting a bit longer. And for some people it will be having consensual sex. When you don't provide people with the information, this is when they get taken advantage of. This is when they make ill-informed decisions. This is when they make mistakes. If you are interested in hearing more about that, I do have quite a number of videos on that topic, and I talk in detail about specific stats and things to teach and so on. So I'll leave those linked down in the video description if you want to check those out. So let's go back to Crowder's article. He says, let's disregard the immediately eliminated risk of increasingly popular STD and STIs. That's not true at all. Abstinence does not eliminate the risk of STIs at all. Some people have STIs passed on at birth. Therefore, even if you're a virgin, you can pass on something to your partner. Or there are some other infections, like for example HIV, that can be contracted in other ways, for example by sharing needles. So a person can have never had sex in their life and still have a disease which you can then pass on to a partner via sexual activity. What Crowder is saying, that abstinence eliminates STIs, is completely incorrect and wrong. Just because a disease can be transmitted sexually, that doesn't mean it's the only way it can be transmitted. People can have these diseases, be virgins, be abstinent until marriage, and then still pass on a disease to their partner through sex. This is why it's so important to actually educate people about what these diseases are, how you can contract them, how you can treat them in many cases, and tell them the importance of using condoms and other physical contraceptive barriers during sex, and also teach them the importance of regular STI testing. The fact that Crowder is completely overlooking this means that either he's A, stupid, or B, purposely lying to push his agenda, and I'm not sure which is worse. Clearly, comprehensive sex education is necessary for all people, including Steven Crowder himself. If he's so ill-informed, where does he get off trying to teach people about sex? He then goes on to say, heck, let's even discount the statistical data showing that sexual exclusivity seems overwhelmingly conducive to a successful marriage. Now, I wish I knew what studies he was trying to reference here with his statistical data, but I don't, because he doesn't link any sources, he doesn't name any sources, none of the links he has in his articles work, so I don't know what studies he's trying to reference. The other thing is, I don't know what he means by sexual exclusivity. How does he define that? Or how do these studies define that? Is he trying to say that sexual exclusivity, that's hard to get your tongue around when you've got the speaking problems I do. Does he mean one partner your entire life, or does he mean a monogamous relationship? Does he mean long-term relationship? Like, what does he mean? Is he just going to discount people who have incredibly successful marriages and relationships while being polyamorous? Is he going to discount people who have incredibly successful and happy relationships while having had many sexual partners in the past? Again, it all comes down to what works for the individual. I think what people forget when, and I've spoken about this in quite a few videos before, is when we talk about statistical trends and stuff and say like, okay, well, statistically X means you're more likely to Y. That doesn't mean that anything other than X means you can't Y. That's not what that means. It just means we're talking about averages and stuff. For example, if I say, okay, the average height for a woman is whatever it is, let's make it up, let's say 5'6". That doesn't mean that all women are 5'6". That means you also have some women who are 4 foot odd. You have some women who are 6 foot odd. You probably also have outliers at other ends of women who are like 2 and 3 foot odd. Let's take another thing where we could say like, okay, statistically, women who are above 6 foot are better at basketball, right? Just to, like I assume maybe that's probably true. That doesn't mean that if you're under 6 foot you can't play basketball, and that doesn't mean if you're over 6 foot you're going to be great at basketball, you know? It means there's a trend. It's not a rule. Does that make sense? It still comes down to the individual, an individual's skill. And it's the same for things like this. Just because maybe monogamous couples have, you know, more successful marriages, that doesn't mean polyamorous couples can't. And let's say there's a trend between number of sexual partners and a successful relationship. That doesn't mean that people who are outside that trend can't also have successful relationships, you know? Trends aren't rules, and I think we need to remember that. I don't know if what I've said makes any sense because I was rambling a bit, but I hope it does. I'd say it's not so much exclusivity that's an indicator of a successful relationship, but more about the things that lead up to that, you know? Trust, communication, honesty, loyalty. You can be in a monogamous relationship, but if you don't have those factors, you're not going to have a successful relationship, are you? He follows this up with, abstinence provides an incomparable bond of trust in a relationship. So for starters, that's absolute crap. A person can be sexually abstinent and still be cheating on their partner emotionally. It all comes down to the person, not whether they're having sex or not. Again, look at these things on an individual level. Don't assume that trends our rules. I am also really interested to know if he still believes this stuff going forward. He said that now he's getting divorced and stuff, blah, blah, his values haven't changed, all this sort of thing. But let's say, for example, when he says sexual exclusivity, he means one partner for life. He means abstinent until married, and then that's your one partner, done. If he thinks that a marriage is more likely to be successful if you've only had one partner, does this mean he won't remarry in the future because if he has a second sexual partner, it won't be a successful relationship in his mind, or he won't be able to stay faithful to his new wife? He says that abstinence provides an incomparable bond of trust in a relationship. Let me read you this next bit and you'll kind of see what I mean a bit more. Yes, I admit it. I'm in a long-term relationship and I'm abstinent. Scandalous, I know. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do, mostly for me because she's way out of my league, and that's what makes it so important. I can tell you beyond any doubt that my lady is able to control herself and stick to her values regardless of circumstance. Just as surely she can say the same about me. It is that display of self-control, that tangible example of living your principles through your life's walk that ensures her that I won't be jumping on the first well-proportioned opportunity that comes my way. Now, I'm sorry, but if you need a vow of abstinence to not cheat on your wife, what? That says a lot more about you than it does about society. Like, me and my partner aren't abstinent, but I know he's not even tempted to cheat on me because he's a good man. He's earned my trust. He's the first man I've ever actually felt I'm able to completely trust and be safe with, and I've never had that before. I've always had, like, even with Dan, our relationship started with him lying to me and meeting other girls behind my back and stuff like that. So it led to a lot of like long-term trust issues and stuff. And even once we worked through them, it's still kind of niggling in the back of my mind a bit. Whereas with Kieran, he has built up my trust from day one, where like he knew I had these worries and insecurities, and he's been very like proactive in being like, I am going to show you that you can trust me and I am going to keep proving myself to you. And there's never been an issue about like trust or insecurity or anything with him. And that trust between us comes not from whether we're having sex or not. It comes from the fact that he is a good man who has earned my trust and consistently displayed openness and honesty, and he genuinely cares about me. And obviously, I genuinely care about him and all that stuff. So my point is, it really does come down to the individual, not whether you're having sex or not, whether you're abstinent or not. It's just down to the individual and your values and how you treat each other, you know? Sadly, I also know many people who were saving themselves until marriage, who then went out and either emotionally or physically cheated on their partners. Abstinence is not indicative of fidelity. A person's character is. Stephen seems to think that you need to be abstinent until you're married and have this one sexual partner for life, right? And he thinks that this display of self-control is what proves you're not going to cheat on each other. Therefore, if he does remarry in the future, does this mean his wife should be worrying about him cheating on her because she's not been his only sexual partner? He's been with someone else, so maybe he'll do it again. Maybe he'll cheat on her. Does that mean no woman should ever trust Stephen Crowder? Well, no woman should trust Stephen Crowder again, but different reasons. But you see what I mean? There's so many flaws in his logic, and He then goes on to say of abstinence, strong trust is the result. Constantly we hear cries of women aimed at their supposedly overly jealous boyfriends. What's the matter? Don't you trust me? No, he doesn't. You slept with him on the first date and there's no reason for him to think that you wouldn't do the same when a better offer comes along. Stephen seems completely unaware of why people have sex, doesn't he? People like him seem to think that people will have the exact same attitude to sex with literally everyone they meet, and this confuses me so much. Like, if a person sleeps with someone on the first date, there's a whole bunch of circumstances that lead up to that, right? You're single. You're attracted to them, you're on a date with them, you get to know them and like them, you want to have sex with them. Now, those circumstances aren't going to line up again if you're already in a relationship because you're stopped at the first hurdle. You're in a relationship and you're committed to someone, you're not single. So you're not going to be going out looking for people. And then if you find someone you're attracted to, you're not going to go on a date with them. And if you do head out with them and it's someone you're attracted to and blah, blah, like there's all these things in the way because you've made a commitment to someone and you're loyal to them. You're not just going to go and jump into bed with someone else just because they're there? Because otherwise, what's the point in making a commitment? Just stay single. Sex really isn't this all or nothing thing that people like Crowder make it out to be. This is another thing that makes me angry about, like, when people like Stephen Crowder talk about things like sexual assault cases or rape cases or stuff like that, and they always, like, bring up, like, say the victim's a woman, they'll bring up her sexual history and stuff, and they'll be like, oh, how can we believe she was raped? She's been with, like, 50 people. And the way I see it is like, okay, if she's had consensual sex with 50 people, people, and now she's claiming this person raped her, then maybe we should believe her, because clearly she knows what consensual sex is. She knows how to give consent, and if now she's saying at person 51, I didn't give consent, we need to think, well, what's changed in that time? Maybe the person doing the raping, you know? Anyway, sex really isn't an all or nothing thing where you either have it with everyone or no one. Like, just because you did X thing with person A, that doesn't mean you have to do X thing with person B, C, and D. You can say yes to one person and no to another, and that's okay. You can say no to one person and yes to another. You can change your mind about these things at any time. Like, look, let me read that line one more time. You slept with him on the first date, and there's no reason for him to think you wouldn't do the same when a better offer comes along. There is a reason. There's a very good reason. The reason of you committed to this person and are in a monogamous relationship where you've decided not to sleep with anyone else. That's the reason he knows you're not going to go and jump into bed with someone else. While we're on the subject, has the whole floozy shtick really empowered women out there? I would imagine that immediate sexual gratification being assumed in modern relationships would do more damage to your gatekeeper status than good. I also imagine that sex with someone whom you share trust, loyalty, and open communication would be far more liberating than the thrill of any one-night stand you could enjoy. Wow. So he really does love sexist derogatory terms, doesn't he? The amount of time he uses floozy in these articles is revolting. But seriously, has my sexual liberation empowered me as a woman? Yes, without a doubt. Because it means I'm able to choose my own partner or partners at any time without feeling shame or guilt about my actions, as long as I'm not hurting anyone else, like any other decent human being. I'm able to enjoy myself, be intimate with people, feel absolutely amazing, and not feel any shame, and not have my life changed irreparably because of the judgments of other people. It means I can choose to enter into a relationship with someone, whether that be sexual or romantic, and if I end up with the wrong person, I can safely leave that relationship. It means that in cases where if I end up with an abuser, which I did in the past, which Steven Crowder's wife did, it means they can safely leave and move on and find someone who will treat you better. Or you don't have to be in a relationship, you can stay single, you know? But it means if you end up with an abuser, you can still leave and have your whole life ahead of you without people judging you for being spoiled goods. I personally feel liberated because it means that in the past I've been able to have amazing one-off sex with someone attractive, and I can have these amazing, loving, intimate, long-term relationships with someone that I share trust, loyalty, and open communication with. It means I can have both, and I have had both. It's been wonderful. There is no downside to that because it's always been my choice. It's not an either or. I've been able to get exactly what I wanted and needed at different times, and so can other people, without feeling guilt or shame or being judged for it. And I don't see how that's a problem. Well, I can see how Steven Crowder thinks it's a problem, because he doesn't like women making choices for themselves. He doesn't like us being happy and independent. He doesn't like the idea that we can be free to leave men like him when they abuse us, as we've seen recently.
And no, this was not my choice. My then wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore. And in the state of Texas, that is completely permitted.
He doesn't like that we have the choice and freedom to do what is right for us. Okay, let's look at our next article, which has aged badly. This is titled, "I'm a guy and I'll never badmouth my wife." Yeah, that aged like milk, didn't it? But I don't know, maybe he just means that he'd never do it publicly, because clearly he was doing it behind the scenes to her face for years. And now he's doing it publicly as well.
I love you. I love you very much.
I don't love you. That's the big problem.
And like he's using the same wedding photo on this article again. It's like the only photo they have and the only one he uses to brag about his relationship. It's very odd. I'm tired of seeing it. So this article opens with a story about guys at the gym moaning about their wives, and to some extent I get what Crowder's talking about here. I also don't really get people who moan about all these tiny little things in their relationships and stuff like that. I feel very lucky that I don't really have anything to complain about with my partner in that way. He doesn't have little things that annoy me. I think potentially what a lot of it stems from is when you get these people who complain a lot about their partners and stuff like that, it's because they've settled for a partner who was there rather than the right partner for them, if that makes sense. And again, this is something I've spoken about a lot before, and I've made this mistake a lot, and I've ended up with people whose values don't align with mine, and it's been horrible. But before I started dating Kieran, I worked a lot with my therapist to like figure out what I needed in a relationship, and then I found someone who fit that list. I didn't just find someone and then hope they fit or try to change them or they change me or anything like that. And that's why I think it works quite well with us and it's good. So surprisingly, I don't hate what Crowder says in this article. Firstly, there may be some people out there who actually believe their wife to be merely the old ball and chain. To you I say you're a loser. Not only are you a loser for dishonouring the woman who is now an extension of yourself, that's a bit iffy, but you're a loser for picking someone who you hate having to come home to every night. What kind of an idiot are you to marry a person that you think is an absolute moron? These same people are shocked when I don't chime in on their urinate and moan fest regarding their old maids. Yeah, imagine that. This is incredibly harsh. I hate how it's written. I hate how judgy it is. But this is probably one of the first things I come close to agreeing with Stephen on. That said, when you do things that Stephen Crowder way and the way that he preaches, which is to rush into marriage as young as possible and do not live with someone before you marry them, that is, you don't really get to know them in every single intimate way before you commit to them. I think that does lead to people choosing the wrong people, and you can't necessarily blame them for that. If you wait until you're a bit older and you really fully understand who you are and know yourself and your values and your needs, if you wait until you really know someone in every way before committing to them, or you commit to them but you take the relationship slowly, at least, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I think that's how you end up with the right partner rather than rushing in. So I get what Stephen's saying, but I also think his approach to relationships makes this more likely. Does that make sense? So I can't blame people for it in the same way that Crowder does. I wouldn't call them losers and morons for it, that's really mean, but I can understand his frustration, and I don't necessarily understand why people stay with people they don't like, you know? Obviously it's different if they're physically or financially unable to leave and stuff like that, or if it's an abusive relationship, that sort of stuff. But like, the idea of people who stay in relationships that are wrong for them just because they're scared of being alone, that makes me worry for people a bit and feel kind of sorry for them, you know? Anyway, Crowder goes on to say, unless those of us who love our wives make a conscious change to the way we speak of them, unless we begin choosing to elevate and praise our spouses instead of denigrate, we'll be letting an incredibly corrosive, self-perpetuating societal meme destroy the very institution that defines our lives. This is actually a pretty great sentiment underneath all the douchiness. I do support that. Yeah, talk up your partners, your friends, your colleagues, family, celebrate them all. I like that advice, it's something I try and do myself. But knowing that Crowder was preaching this but not actually doing it in practice makes me sad, you know? The fact that he's saying, oh, my wife is wonderful, perfect, great, I love her, a couple months into marriage is one thing. But then when you see the videos of him in the last couple of years and how he spoke to his pregnant wife and treated her, he wasn't actually doing this in practice, and it's kind of heartbreaking, you know?
How about you first? Hillary, how do you respect the woman? Yeah. The only way out of it is discipline and respect. It's the only way out of it, or we're at an impasse.
Okay? I love you, but Stephen, your abuse is sick. Your abuse
Watch it.
is sick.
Watch it. Fucking watch it.
I'm gonna let go. I'll get what you need me to get. And I need some space. We need to just talk and baby for a little bit. Okay? I love you. I love you very much.
I don't love you. That's the big problem.
And she wanted something else for her life. That's not my choice. She simply wanted out, and the law says that that's how it works. Now, of course, look, I get it. There are multiple sides to every story, but one thing that is undeniable in this case is that it's no one's fault but my own in that I picked wrong.
Next up we have the article, Get Real, Getting Married Before 25 is Not Too Young. In this article, Crowder attempts to refute a woman who says people shouldn't be able to get married before 25, and his evidence is, I know people who are married young and happy, so you and your politics are the problem. He's so close to being almost right, but so far. Truth is, getting married young is fine for some people, not for others. Simple as that. Crowder's family isn't doing anything wrong by getting married young and being happy, but the woman who wrote the article also isn't doing anything wrong by saying that getting married young was a bad idea for her. Neither one is wrong. They're just different experiences that different people have had. That's all. I wouldn't mind this article so much if Crowder hadn't gone down this horrible "I'm better than you" road. So listen to what he says here, because this is almost laughable now. Today I am somebody who seeks to be the best believer, husband, father, businessman, and man of integrity that I can be.
But Stephen, your abuse is sick. Your abuse
Watch it.
is sick.
Watch it. Fucking watch it.
It's so ironic that throughout this article he's mad at a woman for writing about getting divorced at 29, but he divorced at, what, 32? Seriously, pot, kettle. He then goes on to throw around more sexist insults like, who'd have thought that living the life of a dime store floozy throughout your formative years could negatively affect your decision-making ability or long-term future relationships? Why does he call so many women floozies? It's gross. But it's also ironic because the woman he's talking about met her husband at 19. She was married at 24. They ended up divorced at 29. How is that a dime store floozy or any other sexist insult you want to throw around? This woman lived the exact life that Crowder is preaching, and it didn't work out for her. It's also sad reading this because he was 24 when he wrote this article, and I think back to where I was at 24, and my life could not have been more different. I was living with a man who was pushing for marriage and a kid and all of that stuff, and when I thought about leaving him, when I realised that stuff wasn't right for me, I did have this feeling of, oh God, I've given him so many years of my life already, I'm so far down this path, I have to go along with this and pretend it's exactly what I want. And I was living this sunk cost fallacy and trying to convince myself that I was happy with it, and I wasn't. And it took so much courage to leave that relationship and be alone, but it was without a doubt the best decision I've ever made. I have no regrets about being in that relationship when I was, but I also have no regrets about leaving it. I don't see it as a failed relationship. I see it as a successful relationship that ended. I've spoken about this before. And now at 30, my life is everything I've ever really dreamed of. I'm happy with where I am. I'm happy with where I'm going. But I hate to think what would have happened if I'd listened to people like Crowder at that age and gone down that same path and stayed with a man who wasn't right for me and lived a life that wasn't right for me and gone down the whole legal marriage route and maybe been forced to have a kid and all that stuff that wasn't right for me. When people like Crowder push this agenda of his that he has, it damages people who are in vulnerable or uncertain situations, you know? Finally, the last article we're going to look at is a man's top 5 reasons to grow up and get married, and this article is just very odd because Crowder's reasons to get married are all very selfish. You know? When people ask me, like, why I'm with my partner now and stuff like that, my immediate answers are all about, like, oh, well, he's an amazing person. I love spending time with him. He makes me laugh. He's my best friend, other than Coops. You know, after seeing him, I always feel energized and happy. I want to make him happy. I want to share experiences with him. I want to look after him as much as he looks after me. You know, that sort of thing? I'm in a relationship with him because I adore him, not because I want a relationship. So when I think about my reasons for being with Kieran and then Crowder's reasons for getting married, it just all feels very bizarre to me, you know? He says, as someone who comes from a family of lifers, along with my wife, I just want to say flat out, marriage is a really good deal. Here are a few purely statistical reasons as to why marriage, when done correctly, is conducive to an undeniably better life. Number 1, you'll be richer. Yes, not only do married couples make more, save more, have a higher net worth and qualify for more benefits/financial incentives than lonely single folk, but your kids will be richer too. Again, this may be true on average, but as someone who is legally single, like, and you know, I live alone, I'm financially independent, all this sort of thing, I'm still better off than my parents who have been married for 40 odd years. Again, comes down to the individuals. There are trends, but trends aren't rules. Again, of course, if me and my partner, like, live together, we'd save some money on rent and bills and that sort of thing, sure. But you also have to do a kind of cost-benefit analysis, you know? We both work from home a lot of the time. We both like our space and our independence and our free time. We love being together, but we also love being apart. And that time apart gives us more to talk about and, you know, interact over and have fun with and have a giggle about when we do get together. So when you think about the cash we'd be saving by living together and sharing bills and all that sort of thing, it's not worth giving up the other intangible things that we value in life, you know? That bit of freedom, independence, personal space, my room for all my clothes. It's not worth that bit of money we'd be saving. So you definitely have to take those things into account as well and think about what you personally value more than just money. 2 is, would somebody please think of the children? The single biggest indicator of child poverty is whether both original parents are still together. Again, trends not rules. Clearly you never saw my childhood. Parents were together. We had nothing. Also, the irony of him talking about benefits to kids when he missed his own children's birth by choice and got divorced a couple of months after their birth. God's sake. hypocrite. Other thing is, not everyone wants to have kids. I don't, so I'm ignoring this point. Next. 3 is you'll have more sex, a lot more sex. Okay, so you may not want kids. You may despise them, I get it. Sticky hands. Let's say you're just another selfish, narcissistic bachelor or bachelorette who, quite frankly, isn't deserving of the unconditional love you may oh so luckily find. God's sake. You just want the sex. Statistically, not only do married people have more sex, they have better, more satisfying sex. If the two of you should hold off on sex until marriage, those statistics become even more promising. Again, I'd like to see his source there because I'm not sure I believe it. But also, come on. 1, kids do not love you unconditionally. And 2, us child-free people are not selfish and narcissistic and whatever other insults he wants to throw out. How many times do I have to say it, you know? I have a whole video series on that if you want to check it out. I also find this claim about more sex after marriage dubious. Like I say, I know from personal experience that the least intimacy I've ever gotten in my adult life was when I was living with my partner for 4 years, you know? But that's anecdotal, I'm aware of that. I would, as I say, check Crowder's sources for this, but all his sources in these articles, the links are broken, or they link to really dodgy resources, some that are really not reputable. For example, some of the only links that still work on his articles are to the Family Research Council, which is dodgy as hell. Like, they have an agenda, they're biased as hell. The Family Research Council are the same people who write this about being gay. Family Research Council does not believe that sexual orientation should be included as a protected category in non-discrimination laws or policies, as it's not comparable to inborn immutable characteristics such as race or sex. Homosexual conduct is harmful to the persons who engage in it, as it's associated with negative physical and psychological health effects. It's also harmful to society at large. Sympathy and compassion must be extended to those who struggle with unwanted same-sex attractions, and every effort should be made to assist such persons in overcoming those feelings, should they seek to do so. Many individuals have come to greater wholeness and wellness by seeking such help. They are an absolute joke. They obviously condone and encourage conversion therapy, which is disgusting. And they will often do things in their studies where they take data and they kind of skew it and draw conclusions and comparisons and correlations where they kind of aren't really there. Again, there's a big saying that correlation does not equal causation, and they completely ignore that. And they're like, oh no, this is definitely causation if it fits our agenda. They're terrible, they're awful. Don't take them seriously. Number 4 is you won't be such a pathetic sloth. Married people are more productive. Married men in particular have higher employment rates, work longer hours, and receive better wages. It's time to stop wading through puddles of your own filth as you reach for the hot pockets and have a dame whip you into shape. You're welcome. You might have been like this when you were single, Stephen, but don't speak for the rest of us. We're not all as gross as you. Number 5 is don't die sick, miserable, and alone. Sorry to tell you this, Stephen, but you know you can't actually take people with you when you die. Whatever happens, family or not, you're gonna be alone when you're dead. Sorry. Picture coming home every night to your best friend, your greatest fan, your #1 supporter. She or he makes a good day better, and each bad day good again. Every day you get to live what is essentially a 24/7 sleepover party with the greatest friend you've ever had. Now add sex and sandwiches. Get married like now. Or, here's an alternative if you're like me. Picture being able to see your best friend, your greatest fan, your #1 supporter, whenever you like. They make each good day better, each bad day good again, and you still get your own space and alone time whenever you want. Instead of 24/7 sleepovers, you get sleepovers when it's convenient for the pair of you, and the rest of the time you get a king-size bed to yourself, unless your dog steals half of it. That's what the dream is for me. And even without marriage, I still have all the sex and sandwiches I want. Sorry, Stephen, you're not selling it to me. He's literally trying to take away our rights and then sell them back to us at an exorbitant cost. That's what's going on here. Like he sees someone like me who isn't married, but is very happy because I have independence, money, sex, companionship, and love. And he's like, okay, stop with the sex and love and companionship. I'm gonna take those away, yep. Now, you can have this back if you give up some of that independence that you still got, and you sign this legally binding contract, and then I might give you these back, okay? Why would anyone be okay with that? Why would anyone want to do that, you know? I want it all, and so does my partner. And because of sexual liberation and feminism and all, I don't know why I put that in quotes, but all these things that Stephen says are ruining the world. Because of those brilliant things, we can have it all and we're happy and it works for us. Now, for some people, getting married and, you know, the legal marriage and that sort of thing isn't going to mean giving up independence and stuff like that, because not everyone wants the same kind of life that me and my partner live, and that's fine. It's not a problem. It's not like I'm shaming people for getting married. I don't mean that at all. I just mean that, like, for us, it wouldn't work, and it means sacrificing something that we don't want to, and sacrificing it for something that we already have, you know? It's very odd. So, that was Stephen Crowder for the last 10 years or so, until he made this admission in a recent video.
I have been living with a proverbial boot on my neck for going on years now. Since 2021, I've been living through what has increasingly been a horrendous divorce. Now, let me say on the outset, to be clear, there is no infidelity, any kind of physical abuse at all on either side. And no, this was not my choice. My then wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore. And in the state of Texas, that is completely permitted. It's been the most heartbreaking experience of my life, what I consider to be my deepest personal failure. And just so you know, my opinions on parenting and families have not changed. I've always believed that children need a mom and a dad, that divorce is horrible. And I still believe that children need a mom and a dad and that divorce is horrible. But in today's legal system, my beliefs don't matter. In Texas, divorce is permitted when one party wants it, period. So for well over a year, in the best interest as well as physical safety of my children, we've decided to keep this issue private and to resolve it privately with the appropriate attorneys. It's pretty simple. I loved a woman so much that I married her. A woman who, despite all of this, I still love as the mother of my children. And she wanted something else for her life. That's not my choice. She simply wanted out, and the law says that that's how it works. Now, of course, look, I get it. There are multiple sides to every story, but one thing that is undeniable in this case is that it's no one's fault but my own, in that I picked wrong, and that's certainly not the fault of my children.
He implies that he's only just talking about this stuff now because he's being extorted publicly by someone who said in a clip he has a lot going on right now. It's very bizarre. This is the clip he played to prove extortion.
So if you're familiar with the idea of extortion, then you know the feeling well. Now, some of these threats were so thinly veiled that I'm frankly surprised you didn't all guess immediately.
Stephen has a lot going on, I guess is the best way to say it. He has a lot going on, and that should be clear because people don't do stuff like this if there's not a lot going on in their lives. I am unsure at this moment if it is my place to say more than that. You know, maybe if I feel in further defense, some things should be said, or maybe if I feel that the public has a right to understand certain circumstances.
In an even more bizarre twist, he implies that he's actually the one at fault here. And I was like, ooh, some self-awareness. Until he says he's at fault because he picked wrong. He picked the wrong woman to marry because he didn't realize she'd leave him if he was abusive. The right woman would just take the abuse, suffer through it, do exactly what he wants. This is honestly a terrifying admission on his part because he clearly doesn't have any regrets for how he treated his wife, for how he abused his wife. He doesn't think he did anything wrong. He's just mad at her for having the courage to leave him. It's disgusting. He is a vile, scary, abusive person. After releasing this statement on his podcast, his ex-wife's family then released a statement and a video to explain why she left, and this video is so disturbing to watch. Now, before you watch this, please be aware that this is only one instance of an argument in their 10-year marriage, and this is the only one that was captured on film, and as someone who was trapped in an abusive relationship myself, I can tell you that if this happened once, it's likely it's happened many, many times. We're only getting a very, very narrow insight into the bigger picture here. But judging by his wife's reaction in this video, she's clearly exhausted. She's clearly been through this a lot. She's had the same crap thrown at her so many times, I'd guess. People don't just leave and claim abuse after one argument like this. This was clearly an ongoing problem. that we're only seeing a very small portion of. That said, we also have to be aware that we were not there ourselves, so we can only really speculate. But with all that in mind, let's watch this video and have a talk about it. So, for context, the Crowders are literally millionaires, but Stephen won't let his wife have her own car because he wants to control her. Therefore, when she wants to leave the house at all, she has to ask permission to borrow his car. In this clip, she's trying to borrow the car so she can go do grocery shopping, but Stephen won't let her. Instead, he wants her to stay home and give medicine to the dogs. Medicine which is dangerous to pregnant women and should not in any circumstances be handled by them. This is what happens.
Because I drew a boundary. I drew a boundary. No, you just did it. I drew a boundary of abusive and cruel. You are not taking the car. Because if you refuse to do wifely things, then I will go pick up the groceries. How about you first? Hillary, how do you respect the man? Yeah. How do you man? How do you man receive love like that? No, you're not taking the car.
Stephen,
You're not taking the car.
Stephen,
You are not
then
taking
I will ask them to pick me up. Would you like me to ask?
Oh, that's right.
It's not correct, Stephen.
Feeling some constraints?
Stephen.
Like, I can't
Stephen.
go. Listen to me. You want to walk out right now? Listen to me. I can't go to the gym. I can't go to my parents. I can't call my friends. I can't be home. You're going to take the car and leave me here. Hillary, just think of how boxed in you've made me.
What do you need me to pick up? I'll get it. I'll be back when I'm back.
No, that doesn't work either. You'll be back when you're back. That doesn't work either.
Stephen.
The only way out of this is discipline and respect. It's the only way out of it, or we're at an impasse.
We are at an impasse.
Good. Because you can't have any discipline or respect.
Stephen.
Yeah. There you go. You throw your hand, you give up so easily.
I don't give up, Stephen.
Hillary,
Stephen?
you give up so easily. I just said the only way out of this is discipline and respect. You said, then we're at an impasse.
Stephen, no, we are at an impasse, okay? I love you, but Stephen, your abuse is sick. Your abuse
Watch it.
is sick.
Watch it. Fucking watch it.
I'm gonna let go. I'll get what you need me to get. And I need some space. We need to just talk and baby for a little bit, okay? I love you. I love you very much.
I don't love you. That's the big problem. I've never received love from you. And the fact is, when I go, look, I need you to do A, B, C, and D, you just be disciplined about it, you go, no. But I love you more than life itself. Okay. Put on some gloves. No. But I love you more than life itself. That's not fair. That's not fair, and it's disingenuous. Hillary, you're right. We're at an impasse. Become someone, listen to me, day in and day out, worthy of a wife. No, not as a wife. I didn't say as a wife. As a wife. Hillary, come on now.
I'm not gonna engage. I'm not gonna engage anymore. I'm gonna go. I'll text me what you need. I'll get you what you need. I love you. I'm committed to you.
Put on some gloves. Are you committed enough to do those things?
I'm not gonna.
Are you committed enough to do those things? You're not committed to anything. You're not committed to anything. You just said I love you. I'm committed to you. Walk the dogs. Put on some gloves. Walk the dogs. Put on some gloves. Are you committed enough to do those things? Are you committed enough to do those things? Are you committed enough to do those things?
I'm gonna just
walk the dogs. Put on some gloves. Are you committed enough to get the medication the dogs take? No, you take that in.
So she just wants to be able to leave the house and not put her fetuses at risk, her unborn babies at risk. And he tells her that by wanting to do this, she's not doing her wifely duties. She's not respecting the man. And he turns it around to make it out like he's the victim if she takes the car because she's trapping him there. I'm sorry, but that's exactly what he's doing by not letting her leave the house and not letting her have her own car. He tells her that the only solution is discipline and respect, and he speaks to her with such contempt. She calls him abusive, he tells her he doesn't love her, he mocks her, he literally threatens her with lines like, "Watch it, effing watch it." His tone of voice here is terrifying. This is an angry, angry man. This is a dangerous man. I've been around far too many men like this in my life, and they are scary. Given the chance, they will hurt you. The video then tells us that moments later off Crowder, Stephen Crowder, by his admission, would lose control and scream at his pregnant wife in a threatening tone, "I will F you up," which led his wife to flee their home. So another threat. Crowder claimed there was no physical abuse that led to the divorce, but he threatened it. He absolutely threatened physical abuse many times. And I feel like forcing a pregnant woman to handle a dangerous medication which could harm her and her unborn children is also pretty physically abusive. News articles then tell us that the Weiss family says she spent years hiding her husband's mental and emotional abuse from her family, that he lied about the circumstances around their divorce, and that he wasn't present for the birth of their children, not through an accident, but because he scheduled an elective surgery at the same time on the same day, through choice. Apparently there are several texts between them in which the ex-wife says, "Stephen, I'm afraid of you and your rage. You are scary. You scare me. I want to heal things, but you have to take responsibility. Stop blaming others. Stop feeling pain and sadness only for yourself." Then there's other evidence of Stephen saying he has, and this is like his own words, saying apparently he has a volcanic temper and has been working through therapy to control it. However, at one point in the audio file, Stephen Crowder gets upset because he is frustrated that he is not getting enough credit for not having lost his temper for months, but adds that he can't promise he won't lose it again in the future. This is a dangerous, vile man. It really, really is. And he sees nothing wrong with the way he's behaved. He simply just keeps faulting his victim for leaving him when he abused her. And the worst part is he spent the last decade convincing everyone that he's the perfect husband, he has the perfect life, and everyone should be behaving as he does, when in reality what he's been doing is abuse. Other things have come out now about him mistreating employees, him exposing himself to employees, him treating them badly, him messing people around. It's just all really, really disgusting stuff. Stephen Crowder is undoubtedly a dangerous, abusive man. I really believe he is. So, in the future, the next time you see people like Stephen Crowder talking about how their way of doing things is the only correct way, when you see people talking about gender roles and wifely duties, don't listen to them. Please don't. Find your own path. Figure things out for yourself. Do what is right for you. Don't be afraid to leave monsters like this, because life can and will get better away from them. If anyone talks to you the way Stephen Crowder spoke to his wife, please leave. Please get to safety. Please know you can get away. You deserve to be free of that. It's not your fault. And that is where I'm going to be ending today's video. You can find all the articles I spoke about linked in the video description, along with other videos I mentioned and more things to watch and stuff like that. You can also find links to my Patreon, PayPal, merch store, art and print store, my poetry book, all that good stuff. But yeah, if you're new here, thank you for watching today. It would be great if you want to subscribe and stick around, because I talk about other social issues like this. I do a lot of book reviews and stuff like that, and it would just be great to have you here. So thank you for watching, thank you for your time. Please let me know your thoughts on everything we've discussed today down in the comments, and I will see you guys again very, very soon.